A telegraph landed on my desk, describing an explosion so powerful that people felt it 600 kilometers from where it happened.
A telegraph landed on my desk, describing an explosion so powerful that people felt it 600 kilometers from where it happened.
No journalist had been within 1,000 kilometers of the location, and 3 weeks later, nobody official had gone looking either.
Before I continue, if you have not subscribed yet, do it now, because what we found out there is the entire reason I am telling you this story. We decided that night that we would go ourselves, with no assignment, no approval, and no guarantee we would come back with anything.
No editor approved this trip, and frankly, none of us asked, because some stories are worth more than permission.
We pooled our own money for the tickets, packed what we could carry, and left the newsroom before midnight that same day.
None of us had any real idea what we were walking toward, and looking back, I am not certain that ignorance was a mistake.
5 weeks of travel lay ahead of us before we would reach anywhere close to where that explosion had taken place.
3 different trains, 1 long riverboat journey, and finally 4 exhausting days on foot through forest.
Russia in 1908 felt larger than any country had a right to be. Every hour, another hour into emptiness.
By the 4th day, we started meeting people who had been close to the explosion when it happened in June.
None of them wanted to speak about it directly, no matter how carefully we asked our questions. They would simply look down at their hands and quietly change the subject every single time.
Whatever they had seen out there, they clearly wanted very badly to forget about it. The final 4 days of the journey were entirely on foot, deep through Siberian taiga forest. The silence in that forest grew strange the closer we walked toward the coordinates from the telegraph. Not the peaceful silence of nature, but something heavier, something that took time to notice. On the morning of the 4th day, the healthy forest around us began to change completely. First the trees were leaning, then snapped, and further ahead, completely and totally flattened. Nothing in 5 weeks of travel had prepared any of us for the actual scale of that destruction.
2,000 square kilometers of forest, completely destroyed, every single tree pushed flat to the ground.
Every single fallen tree pointed away from one exact center, like a fingerprint left in wood.
My compass would not settle on a direction, the needle simply spinning as if confused by something nearby.
Nothing in the middle of Siberia should have been strong enough to interfere with a compass like that.
We started navigating by the fallen trees themselves instead, since every single one pointed away from the same exact spot.
We followed that direction for most of the day, deeper into the heart of the destruction surrounding us. Edwin stopped every 30 meters or so to photograph the pattern, certain nobody would believe us otherwise. Then, without any warning at all, the destruction simply stopped in a perfectly straight line ahead of us.
Ahead of us stood a perfect circle of living trees, completely untouched in the middle of total devastation.
I stood there staring at it for a long moment, unable to understand how anything had survived in that exact spot.
We walked toward it slowly, none of us speaking, all 3 of us thinking the exact same impossible thought.
Crossing into that circle felt exactly like walking through an invisible door into a completely different world. Behind us lay total destruction for as far as the eye could see, but around us, absolutely nothing had been touched. The ground beneath our feet was completely undisturbed, as if the explosion had simply respected this one boundary. We spent the better part of an hour simply looking, none of us quite ready to say anything out loud yet. Then I noticed something beneath the ground itself, a depression that was simply too perfect to be natural. I called the others over quietly, and together we found a perfect circle, roughly 3 meters across. The edges of that circle were simply too clean, too precise, to have been formed by anything natural at all.
I started carefully clearing the soil away from the edge, working slowly so as not to damage whatever lay beneath.
Beneath the soil was a surface unlike anything I had encountered in 48 years of living on this earth. It was not metal, not stone, not wood, not any material I could put a single accurate name to. We worked together for nearly 3 hours, carefully clearing soil away from what was clearly a constructed object.
The object itself was completely undamaged, smooth and intact, despite whatever had happened above it in June.
Thomas, clearing the far side of the circle, suddenly stopped moving and called out to us in a strange voice.
There were markings on this side, carved directly into the surface, forming patterns that were clearly deliberate. I have spent my career reading 6 different languages fluently, and I recognized absolutely none of these symbols.
Without entirely thinking it through, I placed my gloved hand flat against the marked surface in front of me.
It was warm beneath my glove, noticeably warmer than my own hand in the cold Siberian air around us. In the middle of Siberia, in August, something buried in the ground was clearly generating its own heat.
Edwin came to us with a look I had never seen on his face in 15 years of working together.
Every single photographic plate he had exposed inside that circle had come out completely blank, every one.
She had never had a plate fail in 15 years of field photography, not once under any conditions. Thomas had been quietly examining the soil around the object, while Edwin and I dealt with the plates.
He had found something in the burn patterns in the soil that none of us had noticed before that moment.
The burning in the soil moved downward and outward from the object, not inward and downward from above.
The energy of that explosion had not come down from the sky and hit the ground here at this spot.
It had come from below, from inside the ground itself, from whatever was buried in that perfect circle beneath our feet.
Thomas wrote it down before either of us said it aloud, because saying it aloud felt like a line you could not uncross. It did not fall here from the sky in June 1908. It was already here, buried in the ground, long before any of us were born.
As the light began to drop, we made a decision, without even discussing it properly. We would camp here that night.
Edwin wrapped his camera plates, knowing he could not photograph anything here, and said nothing about it at all. We wanted to understand as much as we possibly could before we left, and one night felt like the very minimum.
As the last of the daylight disappeared, the markings on the surface began to emit the faintest possible glow.
I sat beside it alone for most of that night, while the other 2 slept a short distance behind me.
I was trying to find language for something that had no language yet, which is the hardest thing a journalist can face.
Thomas woke in the early hours and came to sit beside me without asking anything, which was the right thing to do.
We sat together for a long time without speaking, 2 journalists with nothing they were ready to put into words yet. As the sky very slowly began to lighten toward dawn, the glow from the markings grew noticeably stronger. Edwin woke, saw the brighter glow immediately, and was on his feet before Thomas or I had said a single word.
All 3 of us standing there watching it pulse in the pre-dawn dark, none of us willing to look away. The light moved through those markings in a slow, completely steady rhythm that felt deliberate rather than random.
I started counting the pulses under my breath, and after 2 full minutes I was certain, every 6 seconds exactly.
Thomas wrote the timing down immediately, because precision like that is simply too deliberate to ever be coincidence.
Then, without any warning, the glow intensified suddenly and sharply, flooding the entire circle with warm amber light.
All three of us stepped back at exactly the same moment, without saying a single word to each other. Then, just as suddenly as it had intensified, the glow settled calmly back to its slow, steady rhythm again.
I stepped closer a second time, slower and more deliberately than the first, fully aware of what I was doing. I needed to understand whether it would respond differently this time, whether it could somehow sense the intention.
The moment my bare hand touched the surface, something passed between us that I still cannot find proper words for.
Every tree inside that circle began to glow along its bark, light moving through them like blood moving through veins.
Thomas and Edwin stood completely still, watching light move through living wood in a way that had no explanation.
My hand would not move away, not because something held it there, but because some part of me refused to break the connection.
Thomas moved toward me instinctively, reaching out to pull me back, then stopped himself just short of touching my arm.
The markings directly beneath my hand were brighter than anywhere else on the surface, as if responding specifically to me.
I understood something in that moment that my mind has spent decades since trying to fully translate into language.
The moment I pulled my hand away and the light in the trees began fading immediately, calming back to the gentle pulse. All three of us stood there, breathing harder than the situation physically required, none of us moving at all.
Thomas finally asked me very quietly what I had experienced when my hand was on the surface.
I told him honestly that I was not ready to put it into words yet, and that I might never be entirely ready.
We documented everything we could that morning before we left, drawing the markings by hand since photography was impossible. Whatever that object was, it had been there long before June 1908, and it would be there long after we were gone. We walked the 4 days back through the taiga in almost complete silence, each of us processing alone. 5 weeks back to New York felt significantly longer than 5 weeks out had felt, for reasons that had nothing to do with distance.
I wrote the full account exactly as it had happened, every detail, every observation, every reading from Thomas's notebook.
My editor read every page carefully, set it down on his desk, and told me he could not print most of what I had written.
The official story that reached the public was a meteor theory, clean and simple and entirely wrong. I kept my real notes locked away for 60 years, waiting for a moment when the truth felt safer to say out loud.
I am telling you this now because Thomas and Edwin are both gone, and I am the only one left who was actually there.
It is still out there right now, still warm, still glowing every 6 seconds, still waiting for whatever it has always been waiting for.